This is the Missions Connect Deep Dive podcast.
Blessing the nations through prayer, knowledge, and obedience.
Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you're here. This week, a message came through our app from a missionary kid. And, they weren't asking for money or sharing like a standard newsletter update. They were actually in tears. They wrote in to say that they had just read the week's prayer focus, and they were weeping simply because they realized people were actually truly praying for them.
Wow.
Like with their eyes wide open, They realized they weren't forgotten.
That is, that kind of feedback from the field really anchors everything we're doing here.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that behind every geopolitical statistic or demographic chart in the weekly preview, there are real people.
Exactly.
Real families living in just incredibly hostile environments. When we intercede intentionally, we aren't just reciting a checklist of countries. We're stepping into the lived reality of these believers.
We're standing with them in the trenches.
Yeah, we really are.
So we designed this specific deep dive as a tool custom built for you, the listener. The whole point here is to prepare your mind and your heart for the content coming up in the Missions Connect app. Today, we are looking at the weekly preview for week 14.
Right, which covers March 30th through April 5th, 2026.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to equip you with the deep geopolitical and spiritual context behind this week's three prayer focuses, which are Nigeria, Iraq, and Iran.
And we aren't just going to look at what is happening. We really need to look at why it's happening and how that fundamentally changes the way we should be praying.
Yeah. So let's start with the first one. Let's start with Nigeria. The reality laid out in the weekly preview is, well, frankly, it's staggering. According to the 2026 Open Doors World Watch List, Nigeria holds the maximum violence score.
Which is, we need to understand that a maximum violence score is not some subjective label.
Right.
It is a hard metric. It reflects a sustained, systemic, and multi-layered level of physical threat against a specific population.
And I want to put some hard data to that so you, listening right now, can really grasp the scale. Last year, there were 4,849 Christians killed globally for their faith. Out of that total, 3,490 were Nigerian.
Wow.
Yeah. That is approximately 72% of all global martyrs in a single year, concentrated inside the borders of one single nation.
It's hard to even wrap your mind around that number.
Yes, it really is.
But if we want to understand the mechanics behind that 72%, we have to look objectively at the facts on the ground. The violence in Nigeria isn't coming from just one unified army.
Yeah.
It is a three-pronged reality. First, in the middle belt of the country, you have violence involving Fulani militants. And factually speaking, this is a highly complex conflict. It overlaps with historical, decades-old disputes over land and resources between nomadic herders and settled farmers.
Right, so as resources get scarce, those tensions just erupt into targeted violence.
Exactly. And then second, in the northeast, there is the ongoing insurgency by Boko Haram and ISWAP, which is the Islamic State West Africa province. These are organized, heavily armed terror groups actively seeking to destabilize the region and violently enforce their ideological boundaries.
But, the third prong is what really traps these believers, I think, because the third prong isn't a militant group with weapons. It's the legal framework itself.
Precisely. It's the legal system operating in the northern part of the country. Currently, 12 northern states operate under Sharia law. Factually, this dual legal system creates a deeply asymmetrical environment for religious minorities.
So it's not just different laws on paper.
No, it's about how those laws are applied. It institutionalizes a different set of rights, which often means Christian communities face bias in local courts, disparities in land ownership, and just a severe lack of police protection when they are actually attacked.
Man, so to me, it's like a building facing a hurricane, an earthquake, and a flood all at once, You have military, terrorist, and legal pressures just constantly battering them.
That's a really good way to put it. You have legal disenfranchisement pressing down from the top and violent insurgency pushing up from the bottom.
Right, and they are just trapped right in the middle. Which leads me to a question that I honestly struggle to wrap my head around. With that level of devastating, multi-directional pressure, how does this church not just survive, but actively forgive their persecutors?
That is the defining sociological and spiritual question of the Nigerian church right now. From a purely natural standpoint, a community trapped in that pincer movement should just fracture.
Yeah, you'd think they would either form their own militias to fight back or just leave in a mass exodus.
Exactly. That's the normal socio-psychological response to that much sustained trauma. But what we see instead is this profound supernatural resilience. These believers are literally burying their dead on a Saturday,
Wow.
and then they are walking through those very same streets to gather for worship on Sunday morning.
That is just breathtaking.
They're choosing the path of forgiveness, which completely short-circuits that cycle of retaliation.
Yeah, it's a radical, almost incomprehensible demonstration of the gospel in real time. And that brings us directly to Monday and Tuesday's prayer focus in the app, where we're looking at internally displaced believers. We are talking about families who have lost their ancestral lands, their livelihoods, and often, their loved ones.
Yeah, and the scale of that displacement is massive right now. When you lose the physical security of your home and your farm, your daily survival becomes a literal act of faith.
Right, like where does the next meal come from?
Exactly. How do you protect your kids? Praying for their provision and their trauma care is just absolutely vital.
Well, the guiding scripture for this focus is Deuteronomy 10, verse 18, which says, "He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing."
It's a stark reminder that God is intimately concerned with the physical realities of the vulnerable.
And we should be too.
Absolutely. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the geography of faith under pressure looks very different depending on where you are. Nigeria represents a church that is hyper-visible.
Right, they are seen, so they are targeted.
But as we smoothly transition to our second focus for the week, we encounter a completely different kind of challenge. We're moving from a region where the church is highly visible and under violent attack to a region rich in ancient biblical history, but where the church is virtually non-existent. We are talking about Iraq.
Yeah, specifically, the weekly preview introduces the North Iraqi Arabs. Let me give you some context on the demographics here. There are nearly 11 million of them in Iraq and over 12 million globally.
Okay.
They live primarily in the governorates of Nineveh, Anbar, Diyala, and Salah ad-Din. And get this, they are 97.2% Muslim and only 0.7% Christian.
I mean, it is a region steeped in ancient history. This is the geographic cradle of civilization. This is the territory of ancient Nineveh, the very land where God called Abraham. Yet the current reality is a profound resource gap. The North Iraqi Arabs speak North Mesopotamian Arabic. Currently, they have a New Testament in that language, but they do not have a complete Bible.
Wow.
Furthermore, Joshua Project estimates that it would require 220 pioneer workers just to begin meaningful church planting efforts there.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on that for a second. We are talking about the literal land of Abraham, and 2,000 years after Pentecost, they are still waiting for a complete Bible.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, it's like having a masterpiece painting locked in a vault where no one can see it. But also, why does Joshua Project say we need 220 physical workers? Can't we just beam a digital Bible onto their smartphones?
It's a great question, but it highlights the difference between just transferring information and actual incarnational ministry. Sure, you can send a PDF to a phone, but the North Iraqi Arabs live in a highly communal, honor and shame-based tribal culture.
Oh, I see.
In those environments, truth isn't evaluated just by reading a document alone. It's evaluated by watching how that truth is lived out in community.
It requires relational trust.
Exactly. It requires someone to sit in their living room, drink tea with them, and answer those really complex questions that come up when a worldview starts to shift.
A digital file can't walk with you through the social isolation of leaving your family's faith.
No, it can't. But what's fascinating here is that within their existing cultural framework, there are actually incredible built-in bridges for those workers to use.
Wait, really? How does a culture with a 0.7% Christian population have built-in bridges for the gospel?
It comes down to understanding the internal dynamics there. Within the North Iraqi Arabs, there are both Sunni and Shia communities. In the Shia tradition specifically, there is a profound cultural and theological emphasis on the concept of martyrdom.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they have a deep historical reverence for leaders who suffered unjustly. Specifically, Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. His martyrdom is mourned annually, and it forms a core part of their identity.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Right. If you understand that worldview, it serves as a powerful cultural window. When a pioneer worker introduces the cross of Christ, the ultimate story of unjust suffering and sacrificial death, it doesn't land on a foreign concept. The framework to understand sacrificial suffering already exists.
Oh, wow. That completely changes how I think about praying for them. We're praying that pioneer workers would know how to drop that line from the historical martyrdom they already revere straight to the cross of Christ.
Exactly.
So we connect this to Wednesday and Thursday's prayer focus. And the verse for this is Romans 10, verse 14, which says, "How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them?"
It is a direct, urgent call for those 220 pioneer workers.
Yeah.
And we also have to recognize the geopolitical environment they're living in right now, because the North Iraqi Arabs aren't just sitting in some historical vacuum.
No, they are currently caught in the crossfire of the massive geopolitical conflict happening right next door. Which brings us to our final focus for the week, Iran.
To understand Iran right now, we have to look strictly at the facts on the ground. According to the weekly preview, we are currently in the 5th week of Operation Epic Fury, which began on February 28, 2026.
Right.
It is a joint U.S. and Israel military campaign targeting Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure.
And the geopolitical ripple effects are huge. I mean, factually speaking, you have the disruption of the Strait of Hormuz, you have neighboring countries like Iraq being drawn in.
Yeah, dealing with the airspace and border fallout.
Exactly, and Oman is stepping in to try and mediate. But beneath all that high-level diplomacy, there is a severe humanitarian cost.
We absolutely must separate the military maneuverings from the human toll. Everyday citizens are facing massive supply chain failures. The infrastructure of daily life is just fracturing under the weight of this war.
But here's where it gets really interesting. When you look beneath the geopolitical chaos and the collapsing infrastructure, there is a totally different reality unfolding, the spiritual reality.
Yes.
The underground church in Iran is currently estimated to have anywhere from 800,000 to over 2 million believers,
Which is incredible.
from entirely Muslim backgrounds, and they are factually the fastest growing Christian movement in the world.
It's the ultimate paradox. How does a movement multiply when the country is literally falling apart?
Well, it makes me think of a forest fire. It's like a forest fire that is devastating the landscape, right? But the intense heat is actually causing dormant seeds to crack open and germinate.
That is a perfect analogy. You're talking about systemic collapse, breeding spiritual hunger. In Iran, you have a theocratic government. State power and religion are fused. So,
Yeah.
historically, when the state fails to provide basic infrastructure, when bombs are falling, the populace doesn't just reject the politician.
They reject the religion those politicians represent.
Exactly. It strips away the societal structures and leaves a massive spiritual vacuum. People start asking fundamental questions about truth and hope. And because of this, the current situation in Iran might be the most significant missions opportunity in the modern Middle East.
Wow.
We really need to urge prayers for the protection of civilians, an end to the war, and for bold witness.
Frame this with the verse for Friday, which is Matthew 5, verse 14. "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." It gives me chills thinking about those secret house churches being the actual light of the world right now in a war zone.
It really does.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We're transitioning from just learning about these regions to actively interceding for them.
The weekly preview breaks down some very actionable items. We are challenging you to a 12-minute daily prayer challenge. That's 4 minutes per focus. Or you can use the pre-recorded audio in the app.
And there are bonus challenges, too. You could fast one meal this week to pray for Iran's underground church. You could look up the North Iraqi Arabs on Joshua Project and share that data. Or tangibly support trauma care financially via Open Doors or International Christian Concern.
And briefly touching on the devotional arc for the week, it's just a beautiful progression. It moves from Romans 5, verses 3 and 4, which is about perseverance and suffering, all the way to the ultimate vision in Revelation 7, verse 9.
A great multitude from every nation.
Right. And Friday's focus is anchored in Matthew 9, verses 37 and 38, asking the Lord of the harvest to send out workers.
Well, we've covered so much ground today.
We have, but I want to leave the listener with a final lingering question. If the fastest growing church in the world is multiplying in a war zone in Iran, and the most fiercely forgiving believers are in the deadliest country of Nigeria, what does that reveal about our own comfort zones?
Oh, that's a good question.
How might our own faith be radically transformed if we started praying alongside these believers, rather than just feeling sorry for them?
That is so powerful. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. To access this week's devotional schedule and join believers worldwide in strategic intercession, download the web-based app by clicking the link in the description or visiting assistingtoobey.com. See you next time.
So, you want a faith that actually matters, right? You want to make a difference in the world, to see the gospel changing lives, to know that your walk with God and His Word is impacting more than just your own life. Yeah, you want your life to count for the nations. But here's the thing. You're busy, maybe overwhelmed. You're pulled in 20 different directions. And even though you want to engage in missions and the Great Commission, you don't always know what to pray for, what's happening globally, or what your next step should be. The desire to obey is there, but the pathway isn't always clear. Let the Missions Connect app show you the way. Every day, you'll get a missions-focused devotional with a simple, practical action step and an option to share with the Missions Connect community. Every week, you get 3 strategic prayer focuses with fresh daily text and audio prayers, so you're never guessing about what to pray for. And when you're ready, you'll find opportunities to actually get involved in God's global work. Everything in the devotional and prayer section is free forever, but we offer you the opportunity to try the premium version for 15 days. You want to impact the nations with the gospel? With Missions Connect, now you can. Missions Connect, helping you bless the nations through prayer, knowledge, and obedience. A ministry of assisting2obey.com.